the channel, guys. I am Jimmy Franklin. Today I am going to discuss why headless guitars are so good. I'm realizing more and more that I'm kind of desensitized to the idea of headless guitars. I love them and I think they're awesome. Yeah, actually I exclusively play them live. I think that there's so much application to it. So let's get into the 5 reasons that I think headless guitars are superior. So first things first, I'm gonna get the obvious one out of the way that people tend to harp on a lot, right? And that is the ergonomics. I think everyone talks about the balance of a headless guitar first, and that is something that's super important. Whether you're on stage or you're in a studio, whatever it is, I can sit with this guitar for so many hours. And if you're using something like a Strandberg, hold on, I have a Strandberg, hold on. So if you're using something like a Strandberg, which this is like one of the bosses of the headless guitar world, if you're using something like this, you'll notice all the different cutaways that are just so comfortable. Like this, basically the way I look at this is there's 4 different positions for this. You have standard, you have classical, then you have left leg classical, and then you have like super lazy, laid back in the studio musician that doesn't want to be there. Every one of these applications have been a godsend. I have used every single one of those positions while teaching. I really do love these guitars, and if this wasn't a 7-string, I would play it so much more than I already do. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant. So balance is, and ergonomics in general, is the most important. These companies tend to be forward thinking, so that makes for a really great compromise of comfort and style. I don't know about you, but I really love the look of it. Which brings me to my second point. Now, this is gonna be debatable because some people will say that it's subjective, but I'll explain in a second why it's not. And that is, they look awesome. More specifically, they are eye-catching. Now let's talk about that. From a marketing standpoint, right? If you're trying to market yourself as a musician, if you look at guys like Angus Young, if you look at B.B. King, if you look at Eddie Van Halen, you look at James Hetfield, you look at all these different players and characters throughout history, you'll notice that they have, Slash is a great one, right? They have become synonymous with their image. And I think secretly most of us guitar players are actually, like, we're striving to be that guy that is known for playing that thing. I always wanted to be Angus Young. I played an SG when I was younger, just hoping that people would be like, oh yeah, he plays an SG just like Angus Young. So I think from a marketing standpoint, they are eye-catching in the way that not a lot of people have them. So if you're in a local band and you're trying to get a little bit of attention or eyes on you, yes, everyone's gonna have an opinion on it. And yes, sometimes those opinions are negative, but that's not a bad thing. You're getting people to feel something and look at you a little bit longer. So I'm gonna give it style points, and I'm gonna say that looks are important in this case. Number 3, this is gonna bring us into the idea of a working musician, right? I just said if you're playing live, you need some style points. You don't see these out in the wild that much, but there is application to one of these guitars. One of those applications is just tuning stability. Hold on, let me switch back over to the other one. I literally have videos of all these guitars on the channel, so go check them out. So let's try again, ready? So tuning stability is a big thing to me, right? And tuning instability does not come from the string stretching, not primarily. What happens is when you do a big dive bomb and you have a guitar with a headstock. Ooh, let me grab a guitar with a headstock now. So, so many guitars. So what happens is when you have a guitar with a headstock and you do a dive bomb meaning that you depress the whammy bar all the way until the strings are floppy. What happens is the string is not permanently locked in a nut like this. So what happens is it loosens up and it goes a little bit behind the nut. Then it gets loose around the tuning peg. And when the string resets, those grooves are in a different place than they were before. So the string is actually sitting in a different place than it once was. And so the problem here is friction points. That's what causes tuning instability, is more friction points. So in this case, let's just count it. We have 1 friction point here with the nut. Sometimes we have a second friction point with a string tree, which really there shouldn't be that much, but it still counts. And then typically with a non-locking tuner, you will have a friction point where the string wraps around the tuner. That's 3 friction points that when you have a headless guitar, you don't have to worry about. And really, it acts more like a Floyd Rose than you think. Granted, the Floyd Rose is always set up to do crazier and crazier stuff, but in this case with Kiesel with their hipshot trem, even Strambergs with their trems, and the early Steinbergers, because everything is basically locked into place, and it is locked in here, it's like having a locking nut on a Floyd Rose, just nothing past it. And you could still check your tuning, you can still fix your tuning, like fully without having to unlock the nut at the top. I just think it's superior in all ways. And it stays in tune very, very well. Once they're locked in, I think that's one of the things. I think people are impatient and don't realize that like once a headless guitar is locked in, it's like an old Harley Davidson. Once everything is just like running perfect together, it just runs great. I just mentioned a lot about the headstock, which is going to bring me to point number 4. When it comes to the balance of an instrument, how many times have we seen an old Gibson SG or Thunderbird or anything like that experience neck dive? It's so common. We all know it to the point where it's like an ongoing meme in the guitar world. These experience almost no neck dive. Everyone who plays a headless guitar says, oh yeah, we experience no neck dive because we have no headstocks. The headstock is not 100% to blame there, but it definitely is extra wood you don't need. I recently read an article that said that historians, where are these guitar historians? I don't know, but they said guitar historians have found out that the earliest designs for a headless guitar go back to the 18th century, which is pretty cool. And I mean, if you look at how many guys played headless guitars throughout like the 80s and stuff like that, I mean, Sting had one, he had his headless bass. Eddie Van Halen on the Sammy Hagar years played a headless kind of Frankenstein looking Steinberger. Maybe you're watching this channel and you're like me and you don't play Madison Square Garden regularly. Maybe. A lot of times you're playing small rooms. And I know sometimes my singer is right here next to me. It's really nice to still be able to move around and not whack him in the head. To the point where sometimes if I break enough strings on guitars throughout the night and I have to use someone else's guitar, like my singer's guitar, there's been times where I've played with a headstock just out of sheer necessity that I forget how much room is there. And even when I'm in a teaching environment, it's really nice because how many times have you been teaching? I mean, we've all taught in a small place before, that the room, like the wall is right here and you have a speaker and you have to keep your coffee right here. You just don't knock over your coffee ever with a headless guitar. This one is actually my favorite sounding. It's really crazy. This is the Kiesel Type X, and it's just, I had no idea what I was in for with this one, and it just sounds unbelievable. It can do everything that I need it to do. Which brings me to my last point. Now, this is gonna be controversial, but technically, a headless guitar will sustain better than a guitar with a headstock. Before you jump down my throat, here's the reasoning. Have you ever seen one of these? These little fret wrap guys, these little hairbands that go around the headstock of a guitar? Ready, watch this. What happens is, this is meant for 2 things. First of all, lazy people who don't want to mute, put it on their guitar like this, so when they're tippity tapping, they don't get extra sound off of the other side of the string. Because I don't know if you know this, but if you listen closely, let me see if I can get this sound to make sounds here. Ready? If you listen closely, when you tap a note, it doesn't sound good. When you plug it into the amp, it sounds good because what's happening is when you tap the note is getting picked up from this side. But when you tap, for example, on the 12th fret, the note that's being tapped on this side of the string is half step off, and it's actually fighting with the resonance of your note. So it's not just people who are lazy, but people put them on this side of the guitar. Where am I going with this? You'll find out. So what happens is when you tap, you only get the one side of the string. Sounds very pretty, sounds very clear. There's nothing combating the vibration. So this will also work at your headstock. Sometimes what happens is those extra notes will be combating the notes that you're playing. and actually dull up your tone. This also is this is notorious with like 7 and 8 string and especially 9 string guitars, that you get so much extra string rattle past the nut. So if you eliminate any need for that, you have no reason to put a fret wrap on this side of the guitar because you don't have any extra strings there that are vibrating. It's okay if you don't believe me. Guys, I'm just trying to be out here, be an advocate for headless guitars. I'm not getting paid to say any of this. I just really think that they are good looking and they're important to the future of guitar. And if you want to see any of the guitars that I played in this video, whether it be the Ibanez AZ, the Kiesel Type X, the Strandberg, or my Kiesel Zeus, you can click these videos right here